Hello everyone, welcome to this session. We are going to discuss the factors that shift the IS schedule. So in this there are several factors that affect the IS schedule. We summarize it into narrow down to three major factors. One is changes in government spending, and second one is changes in taxes, and third one is autonomous changes in investment. So coming to the first part, changes in government spending. I assume that in this diagram the initial level of government spending is this much, that means G naught, and the initial level of investment is also this much. So accordingly our initial IS curve is this one, the first one, that red mark, this one, this is the initial IS curve. And when there is a government expenditure, and then the curve will be shifting rightwards. So you can see that the curve will be shifting this much, and as a result you can also see that the saving and increase in saving and tax also must increase, and the corresponding level of increase in income is this much. So here what we have shown here is that the initial position, suppose when the rate of interest is this much, initial level of income is this much, and then what we can see that when there is increase in government spending, for example denoted by G, then plugging using the IS equation, you can see that when del G change there is a increase in government spending, that means del G, then the Y will increase, you can see that del Y by del G is equal to 1 by 1 minus B. So that means del Y is equal to 1 by 1 minus B times del G, right. This is what we have seen in the equation. So here you can see that when the rate of interest decrease, that is fine, the rate of interest remaining constant, not the decrease here, remaining constant. Then you can see that when there is increase in government spending, the GDP the del Y will increase 1 by 1 minus B times, right, 1 by 1 minus B times del G. So that distance is this much, so Y will be increasing this much. This is the del Y. So you can see that IS curve will be shifting rightwards if there is government expenditure, increase in government expenditure. If in contrast to this, if there is decrease in government expenditure, or suppose it's better to say they are compared to the previous level, previous year, suppose this year there is a decrease in government expenditure, or there is increase in tax, is a better way to say, then the curve will be shifting leftwards. So coming to here, which I have just shown in the previous slide, that means changes in government expenditure, as a result the increase in income del Y is this much, 1 by 1 minus B times del G. Second factor is changes in taxes. Suppose there is increase in taxes. When government increases the tax, then you can see that here the curve, this curve will be shifting leftwards. Then as a result you can see that the IS curve will be shifting leftwards. And how much it will shift, how much will be the decline in income, then correspondingly you can see at the same level of rate of interest, that R naught, initial equilibrium position was A. Now when the government increase tax, then this diagram, that the saving plus tax diagram is shift leftwards, and correspondingly you can see that del Y will be declining. How much will be the decline in del Y? This can be denoted by this, the change in del Y is equal to 1 by 1 minus B times minus B del T. So that means this much is the decline in income. So decline in income is going to be this much. So that means this area, this decline in income, that is the del Y, we can see that is negative now. There is decline in Y, this amounts to this much, 1 by 1 minus B times minus B times delta T. Another factor that affect the IS schedule is the autonomous changes in investment. For example, due to changes in business expectations. For example, if there is a favorable expectation, So then you can see that at the given rate of interest there will be increase in autonomous component of investment. So as a result the IS curve will be shifting rightwards. It is almost equal to, the interpretation is almost equal to, similar to del G, because del G is also an autonomous autonomous variable. Increase in government expenditure is autonomous variable. Similarly here also the changes in business expectation, because of that autonomous investment also increases, the IS curve shift rightwards. Similarly if there is adverse expectation, for example war or any other kind of uncertainty in the economy, then the IS curve will be autonomous component of investment will decline, then the IS curve will be shifting leftwards. To summarize, these are the key points that we discussed in this session. That means IS schedule slopes downward, and the other factors I am just noting it down. These are the other factors that we discussed in this session. These are the major summary points. Now let us bring both IS and LM models together, combine, that IS LM models combine. What I am showing here is the IS equation where product market is in equilibrium. That means I is equal to S, investment is equal to saving. This is the IS equation, and the LM equation where money supply is equal to money demand, that the money market equilibrium. This is the LM equation. Both you are now familiar with both equation, and in order to make both, when the macroeconomic equilibrium where product market, when both product market and money market, that is IS and LM, when both markets are, in order to find out both markets are in equilibrium, you can find out the equilibrium level of rate of interest and equilibrium level of income where both product market and LM markets are in equilibrium. In order to find out, what you can do, that equate IS equation equal to LM equation. That means you can directly either estimate IS and LM separately and then equate, or you can directly equate like this and find out what is the equilibrium level of income. So there are two ways: either you can keep solve it in terms of equilibrium level of income, that is Y naught, equating this IS equation with LM equation, you will be finding at equilibrium level of income you will be ending up with this equation. Or alternatively you can equate solve it for equilibrium level of rate of interest, then you will come up with this equation. This is algebraically we can find out the ISLM model come together. That is means when product market, both product market and money market in equilibrium. So diagrammatically we can show in this way. That means the LM curve and the IS curve, and this is the equilibrium position. At this position you can see that both product market, that means IS curve, and both product market and money market are equilibrium, and the equilibrium level of rate of interest is R naught and equilibrium level of income is Y naught. So at this rate of interest R naught and Y naught, we can see that both product market and money market are in equilibrium. You can also do some numerical exercise in order to find out the equation for the IS curve and the LM schedule, and as well as calculating the equilibrium value. So here given some values for relevant variables, and write the equation for the IS and LM schedules, and similarly find the equilibrium values for income and interest rate. So here is the solution. The IS curve can be written as y is equal to this. This is IS curve written in terms of income, and the LM curve can be written like this. This is what we did, that you can plug these values, all these values in the IS equation and LM equation, then you will find out, you can come up with this final IS equation, IS curve, this equation, and this LM equation corresponding to reflecting all these values. So the equilibrium value of output here is that, then you need to equate IS curve with IS curve to LM curve, then finally you will come up with equilibrium level of income in this given these values is this one is much 1733, and the equilibrium interest rate is 11.33. Further, if we make some more change, then also we can find out further. So this is the some more problem set. This is the answer for that. In this solution, that the IS curve is vertical, that y is 2003. So Ln curve remains unchanged, and given the equilibrium value of output, the equilibrium rate of interest is 17%. Moving further, in the what if there is some disequilibrium in the ISLM model. So in order to understand, let us review both Ln curve and IS schedule separately. So you know that each and every point along the LM curve, you can see that money supply is equal to money demand, right? That means money market is at equilibrium. What if we look at any other points other than this equilibrium point, either above this LM schedule or below this LM schedule? Suppose look at this point. I am looking here. Suppose this is the corresponding value of rate of interest, corresponding rate of interest, for example R1. This one is the corresponding Y1. So in this point, what you can see that in this LM schedule, we are going to say that this point, that for example point A is never going to be the equilibrium point. You know why? Because you look at this, at this point you can say that the equilibrium point should be here, corresponding value, but you can see that at this point the money demand, because as in the here you can see that money demand is less than money supply, because what you can see here is that at this point A, the rate of interest is greater than the corresponding, the necessary at the given level of income, that Y1, this given level of income Y1, at this level when the money market should be equilibrium. In order to become for the equilibrium of the money market, the corresponding level of rate of interest is R star. But what you can see here is that the rate of interest is R1, that is above the equilibrium rate of interest. When the rate of interest is above this, that means what you can see that rate of interest is relatively high. And we have seen that when the rate of interest is relatively high, it means the opportunity cost of holding money or opportunity cost of demanding money is very high, right? Because when the market is providing high rate of interest, people can reduce, there is no point in keeping more money for transaction purpose, because the opportunity cost is very high. Instead they would prefer to keep their money in the bond market. So as a result, you can see that there will be a decline in the demand for money. So as a result, the equilibrium position will be attained to, that means it is not in this point you can see that money demand is less than money supply, and finally this point cannot be equilibrium point. Look at any point below this LM curve, for example this point. So that means here here we can see that point B, this also not going to be the equilibrium point. Look at, for example, the corresponding rate of interest. That means relatively the rate of interest is low. That means the opportunity cost of holding money or demanding money is low. So as a result, people will demand more money for transaction purpose. So you can see that when people are demanding more money for transaction purpose, demand for bond will come down. Demand for bond will come down, bond price will decrease, then the rate of interest will increase, right? So finally with the point B, this point is not going to be the equilibrium. Finally there will be an upward pressure for the rate of interest to increase. So similarly point A, which we just discussed a couple of minutes before, this also not going to be the equilibrium position. At this point you can see money demand is less than money supply, and people will be demanding more bonds. The bond price will increase, as a result rate of interest will decrease. So that means there is a downward pressure on rate of interest. So finally this is going to be the equilibrium position where money demand is equal to money supply. So any point, for example this C or this D or any point, for example E, these are not going to be the equilibrium position. So if in all this case you can see that if this is, there is upward pressure on rate of interest, or any other point above above the LM curve there is downward pressure on rate of interest, so that money demand is equal to money supply. Look at the IS curve now. So, in the IS curve, all point along the IS curve, you know that each of these are the equilibrium position where investment is equal to saving, right. Investment is equal to saving. Now, look at for example this position, point A. In this position you can say that rate of interest is low, corresponding that you can see the rate of interest is low. When the rate of interest is low, you know that the investment will increase, there is increase in investment, but you can see that when the low rate of interest, high investment, then in order to become investment is equal to saving, actually we need more income, actually this much income is required. So, but here you can see that income is only here R1 Y1 only, actually required increase in income is Y2. So, when looking at this point below this IS schedule, for example A here when the rate of interest is R1, there is increase in investment, then actually we need more saving, but at the given level of income Y1 you can see that saving is less than investment, that is alternatively investment is greater than saving here. So, here you can see that at this point we can see that investment is greater than saving. So, investment, we already said that investment is called expenditure, that means expenditure is greater than income or aggregate supply. So, as a result there will be pressure on income to increase, then you can see that since actually at this point investment is greater than saving, so the saving has to be increased, which can be generated by increase in income. So, that means there is a market will put more pressure on income to increase, so that required amount of saving can be generated. So, there is going to be a horizontal pressure for the market to for the income to be increased. So, look at for example any other position, for example here position B, here what you can see that the corresponding the rate of interest is very high. So, as a result you can see that investment is less than saving, any point above this IS curve is investment is greater, investment is less than saving. So, that means expenditure is less than Y. So, there is a downward pressure on income. So, actually here there is more savings, right, on the upward any position above this IS curve you can see that saving is greater than investment. So, as a result you can see that either rate of interest will decrease or income will decrease. So, there will be the pressure like this. So, translating, putting everything in one diagram. So, here you can see that the equilibrium position is E, where both IS curve and LN curve is both product market and money market in equilibrium. Any other point you can look, for example A, point A, where you can see that just look at a LM schedule where you can see that here money demand is less than money supply, and also you can see that look at the leftward side of IS curve where you can see that investment is greater than saving. So, there will be then downward pressure on rate of interest and upward pressure, that means horizontal pressure on income to increase. So, that finally we will be coming to this position. So, similarly here you can see that any position you can look at here, you can just apply the point that we discussed in the previous two diagrams, and accordingly we can say that there is pressure. For example here there is upward pressure for the rate of interest to increase and income to decrease here. So, we can see that point F for example is not an equilibrium position. Here only you can see that point F, you can say that money market is in equilibrium, but product market is not at equilibrium. So, when at point F, what you can see here is that the product market is out of equilibrium and there is pressure for output to change. Output to change. So, only at point E are where both product market and money market, product market and money market markets in equilibrium. Let's now continue our discussion. The policy effects, for example, increase the monetary policy. What is the effects of monetary policy on income using ISLM model, and similarly, what is the effects of fiscal policy using ISLM model on the effects of fiscal policy on income using ISLM model. First, let us start with the monetary policy. Let us assume there is increase in money supply, that means the central bank is following an expansionary monetary policy. So, here when an expansionary monetary policy has been initiated, then you can see that suppose increase in money supply, then we are going to see that the LN curve will be shifting to the right, that we have seen in the previous discussion. That means when there is increase in money supply, LN curve will be shifting rightwards. So, the transmission mechanism, how is affect rate of interest and income, let us use this two-stage transmission mechanism. We are familiar with this one, we have discussed this in the one of the previous session. The transmission mechanism here is that when there is increase in money supply in the economy, people will be content with more money, there will be portfolio disequilibrium, there is excess supply of money in the market. So, because of excess supply of money in the market, people are content with more money, and then they will invest their money, their new assets in bond market. Then here actually when increase in money supply, people are content with more money, then they will demand more bond. So, as a result the price of bond increase, and as a result the rate of interest decrease, right. So, because of the portfolio disequilibrium. So, when the rate of interest decrease, then we are now much familiar using the second channel, investment channel. When the rate of interest decrease, then you know that investment will be increasing. When the investment is increasing, then you know that saving must also increase. Then due to the increase in investment, you also know that income is going to increase, right. So, that means decrease in rate of interest, then Y increases. So, Y increases in both channel. One is increase in investment demand, another is due to declining rate of interest. Here investment demand means demand by firms to increase, demand by firms for capital goods, as well as the concerned household sector also demand more durable goods. So, as a result Y will be increasing. So, representing this using a diagram, we can see that when the LN curve shift rightwards, you can see that rate of interest will decrease from R0 to R1, then as a result income will be increasing from this point to this is del Y, right. So, the del due to del R, you can see that del Y, this much increase in income will happen, the income will increase from Y0 to Y1. So, similarly shifts in demand function, what if there is more demand for money. So, here more demand for money means people are keeping other things remaining constant. When people due to uncertainty, when they are demanding more money, then you can see that LN curve will be shifting leftwards, and then here is in this case instead of this way you can write the LN curve will be shifting leftwards when there is increase in liquidity preference. So, as a result you can see that the corresponding decrease in income is this much, that means del Y is this much, that is decline in Y. So, that means this much decrease in income will be there due to shift in money demand function, that means increase in money demand function, increase in liquidity preference. And the another point, what about the real influence when there is shift in IS schedule, what is going to happen. So, let us call the due to fiscal policy, you know that for example due to increase in government expenditure, you know that IS curve will be shifting rightwards. So, here what we are showing here is the IS curve is shifting rightwards. The initial equilibrium position is A. When there is increase in government expenditure, the IS curve will be shifting rightwards, and the new equilibrium position is going to be here, right, where the new intersection where the IS curve, that this new IS curve will be intersecting with our initial LN curve at this point, that the B. So you can see two things here. Suppose if there was no LN curve at all, what you can see that increase in income from here to if from A, it should be this much. This should be the increase in income, that is this distance, it should be the del y. But since there is money market is there, what we can see here is that when there is increase in government expenditure, we are going to see that the interest rate is going to increase. How interest rate is going to increase? What is the reason why increase in rate of interest here? So when IS curve shift, the rate of interest also increase here. There are two reasons why the rate of interest increase. So you can see the rate of interest increase from R0 to R1 when there is government expenditure. The force pushing up income is the increase in first we need to see the income is increasing from Y0 to Y1 and Y hat 1. Why income increase? The reason why income increase is that is due to the increase in aggregate demand, both directly as government demand rises and then indirectly as a result of an income induced increase in consumer expenditure. Right, that is why our theoretical reasoning that why income is increasing. But we also see here is that there is increase in rate of interest because the force pushing up interest rate requires some explanation here. Because we assume here that LN curve is not shifting. So in this case we can see that at a given level of income, equilibrium in the money market and therefore in the bond market is undisturbed by the government spending change, because there is no disturbance in the LM market, that means the money market, money supply and money demand, there is no change, and it is the rise in income in response to fiscal policy shift that necessitates the interest rate adjustment. Note the point here, as income increases, transaction demand for money rises. So we are going to explain why rate of interest increase here, because clearly there is no disturbance in the LM market, but due to increase in government expenditure, income increases. That means as a result transaction demand for money rises. So when the transaction demand for money rises, the attempt to increase transaction balance requires a decline in demand for bonds. So remember here that as a result of increase in income, we can see that there is increase in money demand, transaction demand for money. So when transaction money demand increases, you can see that demand for bond increases. When demand for bond decreases, when the demand for bond decreases, you can see that, because here when the income increases, transaction demand for money increases, that means demand for bond decreases, that means price of bond decreases, which leads to increase in the rate of interest. So that is attempt to increase transaction balances requires a decline in the demand for bonds, thereby decline in the price of bonds and subsequently increase in rate of interest. So the income induced increase in money demand and decline in bond demand causes the interest rate to rise. So these are the two main reason, that is one is income induced increase in money demand and a decline in bond demand cause interest rate to rise from R0 to R1 due to expansion in government expenditure, due to an expansionary fiscal policy. So as a result, we can say that the rate of interest has increased. Due to the increase in the rate of interest, we can see that what we are expected to see, actually the increase in income, the del y is supposed to be this much, this distance, but there is some, but due to the increase in rate of interest, there will be decline in investment. So as a result, the actual increase in del y is going to be only this much. So this is going to be the del y due to because this actually we are supposed to have del y this much, but due to increase in rate of interest, the actual increase in del y is going to be only this much, and this is the, as a result you can see that income increase from y0 to y1. In the next session, we will continue this discussion. We will offer more explanation to this, why there is increase in income is only this much, only to from Y0 to Y1. Thank you for watching this video, and in the next session let us continue this discussion. Thank you.